Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you happenstance to this incredible dialogue with the new Untouchables. And it is my great honor to welcome to the 62nd episode of this effort to reveal as inside elite legal expertise as you will find available anywhere, a gentleman by the name of Chris Swecker, who I'll introduce momentarily. Prior to that, I want to just give a quick heads up to the folks that are currently on, and we will be joined by here shortly. To my immediate left is, of course, is William K. Black, criminologist, expert in all things the law as well as economics, and decades being involved with the DOJ as well as all things regulation. Most known for, of course, the savings and loan crisis and all of the indictments and convictions that went with that era. Below me on my screen is Marc Dann, former Attorney General of the great state of Ohio, and of course, Chris Swecker, who I will introduce. And it's really kind of a thick resume, so I'm just going to basically cover a little bit of it. But to introduce Chris, he has had over 42 years of experience from the practitioner to the executive levels in law enforcement, national security, legal and corporate security risk management positions. He is a subject matter expert in cyber, physical security, anti-money laundering, criminal investigations, financial crimes, and operational risk management. He currently manages a solo law practice as CEO of a respected corporate security consulting company, Chris Swecker Enterprises. He is frequent opinion author and news commentator. Swecker also served 24 years with the Federal Bureau of Investigations before retiring and as assistant director with global responsibility for the FBI's Criminal Investigation Division, otherwise known as SID. In 2006, Chris was named to the acting executive assistant director responsible for 8 FBI divisions, including cyber and criminal investigations, international operations, the FBI Academy, crisis management, hostage rescue team, operational technology, the FBI forensics lab, and criminal justice information systems. This leadership scope was more than half of the FBI's total resources. And further, I do want to mention that Mr. Swecker served as the FBI's on-scene commander in Iraq, which you can imagine what sort of responsibility that involves as well. Chris, before we get started, I just want to share real quick my screen, as I normally do on these calls, just to kind of set the table of what's happening in the mainstream press at the moment. And immediately, I wanted to just bring to the audience's attention that Judge Boasberg blocked the subpoena targeting Fed Chair Jerome Powell, which is trending all over on social media, which is kind of interesting because it obviously involves mismanagement of the Fed redesign in light of all things East Wing. But just below that is the Wall Street bankers are offered lucrative access to join the Pentagon, which is also quite extraordinary, all things considered. But let's just get this rolling, Chris, from the standpoint that we have all seen over the course of the last many weeks incredible information regarding the FBI and Epstein. And since you have a long view and a long lens, I wonder if I could just tee you up with kind of a broad-based question of your reactions to all things that are happening at your former institution.
Well, that's a big, broad topic. I retired in 2006. I came up as sort of old school. Director Mueller, Louis Freeh. We had William Webster was the director when I came in. Two out of those three had been federal judges, and Mueller had been all around the Justice Department, U.S. Attorney in a couple different places. Former Marine, decorated Marine. So I came up old school in the FBI where you checked your politics at the door. You just dug facts, you worked your cases, you worked your sources, you developed your evidence, and then you let it fall where it falls. And I can say, you could say, yeah, that guy's naive. He's really naive. He just didn't see it. But in my 25 years, I didn't see politics play a role in case initiations or how cases flowed. I mean, sometimes, occasionally you would not like the way things were going. There's always a little bit of inherent back and forth between the U.S. attorney's offices and the FBI on they think everything should get prosecuted, and the U.S. attorneys, have the keys to the courthouse, basically. So I think we all played it straight down the middle. I felt like, and this gets slightly political, but I felt like Jim Comey started the FBI down a very perilous path. I think we all know that the FBI investigates and the Department of Justice will make prosecutive decisions. What Jim Comey did, which I think just started the FBI down the wrong road, is he took over as prosecutor and FBI director and made a prosecutive decision, and he made it publicly. And you just couldn't recover from that. So there were some ideologues inside the FBI at the time, and the rest is sort of history. But I had high hopes when the new administration came in that we sort of bury the hatchet and stop using the Justice Department and the criminal justice system as a weapon. And I feel like, as we move through the Patel regime, that hasn't happened. I think there are some people that rightfully ought to be prosecuted, but I think that the FBI that Kash Patel envisions is not the FBI that I grew up in. And I've told, I get asked to speak at retired agents conferences all the time, and I tell them, look, I don't think we're going to recognize the FBI that comes out of this, because I applaud a lot of things, a lot of aggressive, proactive actions, but the grandstanding and the lack of gravitas, and some of the strategic decisions that are being made. For example, I don't think FBI agents ought to be immigration agents, enforcement agents. They ought to be working corruption cases and counterterrorism, counterintelligence, enterprise level investigations. They're not INS agents. So, I have some disagreements with the way the FBI is being run right now. But having said that, they're back working violent crimes again. They're back going after the cartels, and I see some good things happening on some fronts. I don't like the fact of corruption and taking that Justice Department section and basically just completely neutered it, as well as the FBI's, Public Corruption and Foreign Corrupt Practices Act units. So, I'm not sure where that's coming from, but those are very active, and those are the types of cases that the FBI ought to be working. But I'll step back and take a breath. We got some great minds here.
We certainly do. And again, I'll welcome June Carbone, the Rabina Chair of Law, Science, and Technology at the University of Minnesota. And just a quick introduction, June, of course, Chris Swecker, formerly of the FBI, and we just got rolling. And I'm going to turn this over to Bill Black first, because this is a really special moment for me, Mr. Swecker, because when I came up making the con, of which, of course, you participated in, I had the great opportunity to learn from Bill Black. And what he taught me from the very beginning were criminal referrals, which I had the opportunity to discuss with you regarding the great financial crisis. There was a big zero version of criminal referrals that came during that time period. So I'd like to turn it over to you, to Bill, if you have some questions, if you don't mind, for Mr. Swecker.
Well, I'm going to use my time just to explain to the audience a critical thing about Chris, and that is he gave an incredibly early and incredibly blunt warning that there was going to be an epidemic of elite white-collar crime, and that if it was not stopped, it had the potential to produce a catastrophic disaster far worse than the savings and loan debacle. So he did that in open congressional testimony, not hemming and hawing and not hiding behind all the kinds of things you can do, through bureaucratic means. And then he went to the media and explained those things. And my prediction, which when we were able to talk to Chris, he verified, was that none of the financial regulators even bothered to get in touch with him in response to him warning that there was, and I quote, an epidemic of mortgage fraud. developing. So you're now listening to someone who did his utmost to prevent the great financial crisis, and had he been listened to, would have prevented the great financial crisis. And then beyond that, if he has time, he can tell you the story of how many total criminal referrals he thinks he got from all of the federal banking agencies combined, which, if I recall, is somewhere around 6. So again, I thank Chris, and I want his record to be understood by the public.
Well,
I appreciate that. Those were interesting times.
The Chinese curse.
But
Yeah.
but it brings.
Then I got a firsthand view of it at, I went to Bank of America as head of security, and it all crashed down around us.
Wow. That's really amazing. Talking about the eye of the hurricane in their corporate headquarters, no less. Chris, I think what Bill just brought up, I think is important, and I just want to kind of tee this up and then let you roll with it, and then Mark, I'll ask you to follow up. But look, right now, all things Epstein, quite frankly, harkens back to 2 decades ago. We're hearing from PBS, we're hearing from this, that, and the other outlets, all sorts of craziness that have taken shape, decades ago. I guess just the really basic question, given what Bill just said, is here are these institutions that have qualified people like yourself that were deep inside, being able to prevent one of the most catastrophic, economic failures in the history of the United States. I don't know if there's a corollary, but a lot of people are wondering why 4 administrations, for example, may have had some of the information that we're seeing revealed now through the Epstein files.
Well, I mean, the real scandal in that case is the initial treatment of the case and the sort of the sweetheart deal that took place in the Southern District of Florida. And then there's efforts after that to sort of squelch any other investigations that involved him. I mean, that is just deep corruption of the system itself. And I dealt with the U.S. attorney that gosh, what's his name again?
Costa?
Alex. Yeah. He was in the Justice Department. He was in the Southern District when I was down there, and then he was also inside the Justice Department. I think he headed up Civil Rights Division. He was, I didn't read him as the kind of guy that could be compromised in that fashion, but he most certainly was, and that's worth investigating to the very core of it and find out how that actually happened. And I don't think I truly understand it, even after all the disclosures, how he was so thoroughly compromised that he would, make that sweetheart deal and try to foreclose any other prosecutions by other jurisdictions. But he certainly did it, and clearly there was abuse going on. There were underage girls that were being trafficked, no question about it. I think the rest of it is a lot of it is salacious stuff that I don't know we'll ever be able to prove. We see Bill Clinton in a hot tub with a young lady, but what evidence do we have beyond that? I mean, the Clintons are masters at not remembering anything and not recalling pertinent facts. They invented the game. But you see a lot of stuff, but you don't see the linchpin evidence that you need to make that bridge to prosecution, which is you got to have it. I mean, it's scandalous and salacious doesn't equate to a successful prosecution.
So, Mr. Swecker, Marc Dann blew my mind when we were out doing our work on the con, when we discovered that he and his team were the only AGs in the United States that were able to put together a RICO conviction of what you ultimately told us some very high-level CEOs should have been questioned and potentially gone off to jail. In Ohio, they were able to take a mid-level player that was working about an $80 million scam that was representative of the bigger picture. Mark, what is your sense of the nature of what Mr. Swecker just addressed?
Well, I'm actually really curious, Chris, if you could share with us what you know about the current kind of state of the morale of FBI agents, and their and the work environment. We've seen U.S. attorneys quitting and leaving when they've been asked to do things that they didn't think were appropriate. What's going on with, or to the extent that you're aware, what's going on with FBI agents, and what what's the impact of this of this disregard of the rule of law that seems to be infecting the operation of the federal government and of the historic respect for boundaries between the politicians and the law enforcement community.
Yeah, I mean, I think the word I'm getting from a lot of different sources is the morale is very low. And it's low because people don't want to be viewed as an agency that's led by someone who's kind of let's face it, he's a media hound and he has no gravitas, and he's there to with the raid jacket and the hat to grab credit for things that we ought to be giving credit to the state and locals for. So to answer your question, Mark, it's pretty low. I mean, I know the retired agent community, we were all down on Comey et al. But where I would say there's more dissatisfaction, there's more concern, even more concern about the current leadership because of what the things that you just described. We know how things should operate, and it's not this. You know,
Yeah,
it's not what the way I want the FBI to be viewed. They're viewed as a highly politicized agency now, even more so than they were under Comey and the other administration.
yeah. I mean, as a politician who headed a law enforcement agency, we ran, and the AG's office had the Bureau of Criminal Investigation under its jurisdiction as well. I mean, I understand the temptation. Nobody loves those raid jackets more than a somebody who
Right.
loves attention and has the narcissistic tendency as of a politician. But I also knew that at the end of the day, if I were to exploit that, that I'd lose the confidence of the folks that were working for me, and they would be distracted from doing their job. And that's the worry I have about today's FBI.
Yeah, I mean, it's the use of the jet. It's the use of, the Italy trip was a disaster, a PR disaster. It was, it's jumping the gun on press announcements and releasing information that shouldn't be released. And then it turns out to be inaccurate anyway. But even if it was, even if it was accurate information, it shouldn't have been released in a couple of those cases anyway, because it wasn't his information to release. So, we could go on and on about it. I mean, we know how things should operate. You've been an AG for a state, a large state, and the public perception that you're objective and you're fair and you have gravitas and you have, you respect the office and you respect the oath of office. All of that needs to come across. It's not a make-a-wish position, and that's kind of what
That's
a lot of
that's
the
what
agents are saying is like this. Okay, it's a make-a-wish situation. He's just going to fulfill all his bucket list dreams and travel here and travel there and rub elbows and bring in the mixed martial arts to train the FBI agents at Quantico, and I mean the list goes on and on. Stuff that I see every day. Everybody's just scratching their heads saying, "Check this one out."
See,
Wow.
I already thought that all the FBI agents could do karate. So if they can, you
Yeah,
don't crush my dreams.
but I
And let me just follow up because I think there's an important moment in time coming in the future, and there was quite the controversy over several U.S. senators admonishing or suggesting to soldiers their obligation not to follow illegal orders. Um, I think we may see a similar scenario coming up when it comes to the 2026 election. Ohio just turned over all of its voter files to the Justice Department this week, including driver's license information, Social Security information, without any allegation or of a crime, without any probable cause that something was wrong. So what's your advice to existing FBI agents if they're asked to take actions that they view or that are illegal?
Well, I mean, you have an obligation not to obey immoral orders and illegal and unethical orders. I mean, you can't love your job so much that you're not willing to take a stand. And that's again that was one of my problems with Jim Comey when Donald Trump sat down with him and said, "I want your loyalty, undivided loyalty above else all." He should have said, "No, I'm loyal to the Constitution. I'm loyal to my oath of office." And be willing to you have to have the courage of conviction to step back from the job. And that's that I guess there's no other way to put it. You just don't follow immoral or illegal orders. But that's all about the context. I'm talking about generally the way yeah, you can't politicize that particular issue. I think the way they did it in this, the earlier instance that you did it, it was a big political backdrop to it.
I know, Chris, that we talked earlier that you would have to jump. I don't know if you can take two more questions or if you have to go, but obviously I want
Yeah.
to honor your wishes.
Yeah, I can take a couple more.
Okay, so I'll start with Lewis Clark here, the executive director of the Government Accountability Project, who, congratulations, Lewis, and we'll pick up this conversation after Chris departs. But the Government Accountability Project had 4 terrific victories this week in a number of very important cases. And before going and launching into all of the details of it, I'll save that possibly for later. But just to let you know, your mic is on mute, Lewis, just in case. But here is, of course, is one of the most high-level veterans of the FBI, and of course, you being within the Beltway, I'm sure you've had a lot of experience in all things, manner, shape, or form with the Bureau. What comes to mind for a question that you might want to ask Mr. Swecker?
Well, I mean, over the years, we've been around for almost 50. Over the years, we've actually done rather well in some of the FBI cases that we've taken in terms of whistleblowers. But now, all of a sudden, there's like this purge of FBI agents who, for example, worked on the prosecution, or I should say the investigation of the of Trump, working with Jack Smith, and they're all being pushed out. Do you advocate that these people fight back?
I mean, a case by case situation for me. If it were somebody like Andy McCabe, who I think is, had lied 3 times to the IG, if you read the report, and I think he was very, very much had his thumb on the scale. I don't feel sorry for him. I think but I know there are some righteous FBI executives, the head of the New York office, for example, and others. We have a pretty good network inside and outside the FBI. And there are some pretty righteous people who have been shown the door. And, there are some of those people I would line up with them. And, if they said, could you help with, expert testimony or consulting work or something, I'd say yes, because there are some of them that didn't deserve what they got. But to me, it's a case by case thing.
Right. So I might be contacting you.
I should be careful what I say.
I know. Well, just to get your appraisal, confidentially. But basically, we do have people who are coming forward who seem to be purged just because they were doing their duty at investigating crimes. Or potential crimes or alleged crimes.
Right.
That obviously have a huge political overtone. Also, we have had recently one particular FBI agent coming forward and essentially saying that they were ordered to spy on, surveil actually protesters who were not in any way violent protesters, just protesters out in California. And they refused, but then have been shunted off to, other duties and taken off of, off of their regular work and are feeling quite depressed about their new assignments, which seem to be just because they raised the issue of First Amendment on behalf of these protesters that are just being targeted.
Well, the Attorney General guidelines are pretty clear. So are the FBI. The dialogue, both sets of, those are both the Bibles that how the DOJ and the FBI operates, and they're pretty clear on what level of predication you have to, surf the internet or go to private meetings or even to to go into First Amendment activities. So and I've seen agents. There was a group called CISPIS back in the day, and they were way left, I should say. And one of our youngest agents decided to go to a meeting on her own and try to figure out what they were talking about at this meeting. And boy, she got called on the carpet and OPR investigation and all that. So we know where the boundaries are, and if an agent feels like that's where that they're crossing those boundaries, then they have to do what they have to do. And we've all back in the times when we talked about the financial crisis, whistleblowers were singing from the rooftops, and in a lot of cases nobody listened. And I think I'll say this in general about the way things are operating inside the Bureau. I think this type of leadership collapses under its own weight at some point. I'm a conservative. I thought that we would see better come out of what was this administration when it comes to Justice Department and law enforcement activities. And we all of us are lawyers, professionals. You just don't like to see the justice system used in this fashion. It wasn't drawn up that way. Our founding fathers didn't set it up that way. And I think my wife says the truth will come out in the end. Well, I hope it does.
Thank you for that. And then June, if you would like to offer your thoughts.
Hi, Chris. I've admired the work you've done, and I'm curious how you would assess the current threat environment. What should we be most worried about? The weakening of counterterrorism, the utter decimation of white-collar crime, the foreign intelligence, looking at foreign intelligence within the U.S. as opposed to terrorist threats. What should keep us up at night most?
God, we used to think that white collar crime was, the FBI was just uniquely positioned. It was a major priority of the FBI. I don't see that now. But if you're talking about threats in general, I mean, right now, obviously, we're under a terrorism threat level that we haven't seen since 9/11. And because of the situation with Iran, we got sympathizers, lone wolves. We've got that threat. We've got this, the so-called sleeper cells. And 4 years of open borders was not helpful at all. So because there's a lot of people are here, we don't know what they're doing here, and we don't. It would be impossible to think that terrorist organizations had not infiltrated their people into the country, as well as hostile intelligence services. I mean, it was too easy to come in, and I just think it was a national security risk all the way around. But I feel like we've left some areas that uncovered white collar crime. We don't hear much about counterintelligence these days. I hope it's because they're busy working behind the scenes. Counterterrorism, I think we're out there, but I think a lot of resources. I used to be very finely attuned to where our resources were going. We had a system called TURC, time utilization record keeping. Every agent accounted for their time using a designator on their time, and they filed it weekly. you could tell exactly how many agents are being devoted to a certain area across the entire FBI. If we looked at that right now, I'd say we were probably really light in white collar crime, really light in counterterrorism, and we're probably too light in public corruption, way too light in public corruption. I'm not even sure they're working that anymore. And that used to
Yeah.
be number one priority of the criminal division. What agency besides the FBI can work political corruption? They never stay, where they grew up. They don't have ties to that area. They're not, sort of in a compromising situation, having to work in an area where they grew up and maybe worked. So agents are I think uniquely positioned to work public corruption. It's hard to work. It's hard to find. It doesn't come right to you and fall in your lap. And if they've called off the dogs in that area, then we've basically called off one of the finest watchdog agencies in the world when it comes to public corruption. IGs are out there too, inspector generals, but again, I don't know that their mandate is to find corruption. So this is a long answer to a short question. Uncovered in white collar, uncovered in public corruption. Too many agents work in immigration stuff and stuff that I think that local law enforcement can work. We got very small number of agents, 13,000, 14,000 agents. They need to go. We always were very, very attuned and very sensitive to working areas that were not duplicating what state and local law enforcement could do. We want to work with them, but you want to work the areas that nobody else can work, that you're uniquely qualified and positioned to work. I hope that makes sense.
It does. And I want to thank you so much for your time, Chris. We hope you'll join us again sometime in the near future, and we wish you all the best moving forward.
Yeah, I'm honored to be on with this panel here. I really appreciate everybody. Good questions. I hope I didn't go on and bluster too much, but I really enjoyed working with all of you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you for your service too.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And all you've done. And thank you for everything. And so we'll look forward to trying to connect again. All the best to you and your family. Be well.
All right. Yeah. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Okay, guys. So we are about halfway through the dialogue this afternoon. And I guess I want to follow up with you, Bill. In context to, I guess, DHS is not being funded. We know that the Republicans are hanging on to, you fund ICE or you don't get, for example, what's it called at the airports, TSA, and so on and so forth, which leaves major holes considering we're in a war. I wonder what your reaction is to what we heard from Mr. Swecker.
So he confirmed what people have feared is exactly what's happening. They have taken our close to only reliable source of investigation against elite corruption, domestic and foreign, and eliminated it. And then in the story today that the Pentagon, and I think of this at a time when they're shutting down entire units that are vital, the Pentagon has so much money unspent that they're hiring teams of investment bankers to invest tens, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue. And because it's the Trump administration, they're recruiting them with something that emphasizes how good this will be for your future life as an investment banker, because of all the incredible connections you'll make with the world's top bankers, but also in particular, the top government/economic officials all over the world, right? So these are in particular the notoriously corrupt sovereign wealth funds and such that the Pentagon is going to be dealing with. Now that is a recipe for catastrophe. It's a recipe to produce corruption. It's a recipe with today's prediction markets. to leak all kinds of insider information. And this is occurring just as we've been getting confirmation that Doge officials did, in fact, leak information, massive amounts of incredibly confidential information vital to the privacy of American people, but also that could be monetized to produce hundreds of billions of dollars in economic value to the people who betrayed the American people, which would be the Trump administration and the Doge officials. And we've just heard from Chris that there is nobody left to potentially even investigate, much less prosecute these kinds of crimes. And we know from all the work on the con that if you don't investigate it, it don't get known, right? And nothing gets done about it, and such. And this is an area where it isn't just that the states lack resources, they often lack jurisdiction. So you can't even have, those crazy state AGs in Ohio that can bring an action against, as you say, one of these mid-sized frauds through RICO action. There's just nobody left. I mean, except what we've been emphasizing now for a year, whistleblowers.
Right.
Whistleblowers are the only folks left. And we know that in the old days, whistleblowers, basically, they were sort of natural allies of the media. But we're seeing the media being corrupted and suborned, and not secretly, but openly. And again, with the deliberate idea of spreading intimidation, that if you report anything negative, in fact, Hegseth gave a press conference, I believe it was this morning.
Well, Bill, I was gonna say that was when I spit out my coffee this morning. So go ahead, and I'd like to follow up.
Yeah, dictating what the headline should read instead of the real headlines, which were not hard hitting, by the way, at all, but to turn it into complete sycophancy. And with that, I'll hand it off to Marc.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I was actually working on a brief that former AGs of Ohio were filing in support of the Haitian, maintaining the status of Haitian immigrants in the U.S. And I want to talk about that later too. But while I was working on it, I had the Hegseth morning briefing on, which is must see TV. And I watched his lecture to the media about their headlines, but he went further in that briefing to say, don't worry about you people at CBS. I'm sorry, at CNN. We're going to fix you when Larry Ellison takes over and owns you. This is the Secretary of Defense in the middle of a war, promoting the merger of a private company and the acquisition of a private company with serious antitrust implications, but also to I don't want Lewis. I hope you're never out of a job, okay? But this administration is so openly corrupt that it's going to make whistleblowers a thing of the past. I mean, they're doing it directly to the country on national television, and that was my epiphany this morning. Is he just flat out shilled for a campaign contributor, as he does for the defense companies that are producing weapons, as he does for it's just of all the people, the Secretary of Defense. While American pilots are risking their lives flying over Iran, to take a moment to threaten CNN, but to tell them don't worry, because when our friend takes you over, your headlines will say exactly what we want them to say.
I want to combine a couple of things and tee up a question to you, Lewis, real quick, and I'll get right back to you, June, in just 1 second. I apologize, but I think this is critical for us all to kind of think about. Bill started with the front page article of the New York Times this afternoon that revealed that Wall Street advisors have now been welcomed into the Pentagon. We know the Pentagon hasn't passed any audit over the course of, I don't know, however many years. Like he said, that is a recipe for disaster. It almost makes me feel like the quiet part is, again, like we talked about with whistleblowers, right in front of our face. But to further the point, Bill had talked about the power of whistleblowers, and for a year, Bill has been saying, particularly going back to the No Kings rally of last summer, subpoena Elon Musk, right in the aftermath of when he said he knew what was in the Epstein files. And there was a plan not to wait for the midterms, but to use state legislatures and whistleblowers to be able to prosecute this now, on top of this final point. That I have now seen other attorneys out there talking about the Bar Association, like you guys have, to be able to, basically get their bar licenses pulled. Whoever these guys are from the DOJ or FBI or whoever's involved with these cases, now that's become a widespread discussion item when you guys have been at it the whole time. And the last piece of this puzzle that Bill introduced to you, Lewis, of course, the whistleblower, you were talking to us several months ago about what you guys had as it related to Social Security. And of course, this inside information that now impacts, I think, tens of millions of Americans. I don't think that is an exaggeration. Please just, tell me what your reaction to all of that is.
Well, yeah, we had the part. I guess we had the first part of the revelations of that. That the Doge operation had taken the files of 500 million Social Security holders, Social Security card holders, which obviously included a number of people who are passed on, but still 500 million files, and had taken them and put it up in the sky. And taken them out of the Social Security regular database, and we didn't know what had happened. So when we revealed that to the New York Times and to Congress directly to oversight committees, we got a letter that in 49 years we've never gotten, which was a cease and desist order from the Social Security Administration on our project and on our client as well, to not not further distribute any information that we had about this at least possible crime. And then after that, it has come out, the Inspector General Inspector General investigation has revealed that there was an agreement, but we don't have the details of that yet. But there was an agreement with supposedly a voter suppression organization to give that data over to them. We don't have information about whether it actually happened. And then the new revelations, of course, is that one of the people working in that team did possibly or allegedly presented that information for personal benefit in order to get a job or to work with a defense contractor. We don't know. We can't confirm that, but it certainly does require significant investigation.
June, you always have the most incredible skill to be able to provide the soul of this whole thing. From the very beginning, you've told us the truth about everything, what to expect, how things are going to go, what it's created based on your long track record, your history, and everything else. But my God, based on everything we're seeing today, I wanted to just ask Chris so much about what we've seen in the FBI, especially the PBS revelations and the mishandling of Epstein information. But at the same time, I happened to think in my mind, it was like, and I asked this to David Enrich of the New York Times. I was like, is it possible that, for example, and this is the corollary, that nobody dug deep on the Epstein investigation at the time because the entire world was collapsing under the 2008 great financial crisis? Anyway, I just wanted to plant that seed, and wherever you go, I can't wait to hear.
Well, Bill and I are visiting our granddaughters, and I was putting the 9-year-old to bed the other night, and she said something about our country is being destroyed. And the question I asked Chris, inspired by our granddaughter, was very much about that. When Trump was reelected the second time, one of my first comments was he's going after the institutions that still work. And first among them is the military. We all know. We can all cite problems with the military. But the military is still, and was up until the day Pete Hegseth walked into the Department of Defense, its true name, one of the few institutions left that still had esprit de corps. What was on your epaulets, how many stars, is still more important than whether you have aspirations to be Douglas MacArthur. That the idea that there are rules of law, rules of engagement, rules that govern the ethics of the military, was drilled into every officer as part of the idea of honor, of a code of honor that governed the military. And if you are asking troops to put their lives on the line, you have to ask them to sacrifice their lives for something more than their 401ks. And that ethos is what Pete Hegseth is out to destroy. When I watch what Trump is doing, I had said, I had been optimistic that it would only take another Great Depression rather than a war to tame the oligarchs of today, the way the oligarchs that caused the Great Depression were ultimately tamed not by the New Deal, but by World War II. I now think another war, another world war, is far more likely than it was 2 weeks ago. And so when I say am I being concerned, when I watch the clown show that is currently putting our lives, the lives of our troops, the lives of our people at risk, they're a bunch of incompetents. And we know that. We know that because they're acting like the people, the monarchs. Henry V, that caused the wars of Europe. People forget that Henry V is known because of Shakespeare rehabilitating his reputation by having him give a famous speech at the Battle of Agincourt. What they forget is the Battle of Agincourt, where the Brits were outnumbered by overwhelming numbers and facing a suicide mission, happened because Henry, following his own ego, launched the British Empire into a stupid war with France. And his tactics were so bad, he got himself cornered and about to die because the ego of monarchs inevitably gets you in trouble. Henry V died at the age of 36 in his next war. So the triumphs are short-lived. The consequences ring through the centuries. And that's what we're about to do. I'm ending only with one more note. When AOC asked her constituents why could they vote for her and Trump, one of the answers was he wasn't going to get them into war. And my response is Trump is a progressive conspiracy theory out to destroy the US military, to make sure that the next president won't be tempted to do what Trump is doing, because we will no longer have a military capable of winning even a war where overwhelming odds are on our side.
When I went down this path to meet all of you, I was so desperate to discover people of honor of courage, of character, but most importantly, professionalism. And you guys have exceeded that beyond my wildest comprehension. And as terrifying and as frustrating and as outrageous as all of this is, I want to end on a good note here. And Marc, I'm definitely give you last word here based on what you had teed up in a minute. But I want to draw attention to what happened with Lewis and the Government Accountability Project, because they won 4 major federal court wins that included, I believe, a federal district court ruled on your Voice of America litigation that every decision Kari Lake made in the last year is now null and void. Second, a federal district court in North Carolina dismissed with prejudice 2 cases filed by Purdue Farms against your clients. The company claimed that whistleblower protection provisions of the Food Safety Modernization Act were unconstitutional because they denied the company a jury trial, which as a person, the company was entitled to. You had expected the Trump administration to switch sides on behalf of Big Ag, but it turned out that they were on your side. Wow, that's incredible. And then finally, on March 9th, the federal district court granted your motion to intervene on behalf of the East Palestine residents into a consent decree against Norfolk Southern. That means that you had a seat at the table with all of the substantial evidence of wrongdoing when it comes to remedies for the derailment and the subsequent contamination of land, home, and human bodies. The federal government and the state of Ohio unsuccessfully opposed your intervention. Can you kind of give us some closing comments about this incredible week of your success?
Well, certainly the theme of this, of our presentation today is really Voice of America, with the essential overturning of 1 year of attempts to silence Voice of America, whose mission really is to support democracy throughout the world and to broadcast, into countries that were essentially run by dictators, and so that effort really, at least at the district court level, is now run aground and is defeated. Of course, they'll appeal, and we'll be fighting that out. But I don't see the Supreme Court turning that case around, because this was really on the merits of the case. It's not some procedure. It's not even a preliminary injunction in a sense. I mean, what it is a ruling that that entire operation of closing down Voice of America has been illegal from the get-go and throughout. The 2 cases in North Carolina where we were surprised that the Trump administration did not switch sides and side with Big Ag, and we think that's really good that they did not, and so we were heartened by that. And in terms of what happened in the state of Ohio with the East Palestine derailment and contamination of the entire area and certainly the community, there it's been both the Biden administration and the Trump administration, which has provided very little help for those people. But at least now, because of a federal district court judge, we are going to finally have an opportunity to present our substantial evidence from a lot of whistleblowers, a lot of scientists, about the real dangers of the contamination that was spread throughout that community and the really bad decisions to burn 6 carloads of highly contaminated vinyl chloride and 3 days after the accident, rather than to remove that safely and not burn it for the entire community to get doused a second time.
Outstanding. And Marc, obviously you had some more to add, but I'm wondering if maybe that was news to you regarding that huge train derailment and the impact it had on your state.
No, I'm well aware, and I've heard from lots of folks who are dissatisfied with the response of the government And you're right. Going back into the Biden administration, the regulatory capture of the railroad industry in particular probably is the oldest regulatory capture in the history of U.S. government. From the very inception of the railroads, that has been they have exercised outsized political influence, and it continues. And the working class town of East Palestine has been devastated by what happened, and the government continues to keep from those residents the condition of the water
Yeah.
that flows through and there are dangers. While there was a substantial personal injury settlement, at the end of the day, I got out of it because I didn't think that the lawyers were acting in the best interests of the community as they went forward. So we didn't take any role, despite being asked by a lot of folks. But the outside personal injury lawyers came in and really ran havoc over the local bar in our efforts to try to protect people and to their own enrichment and to the detriment of so many people in East Palestine, and to the great frustration of the judge. And then on top of that, the administrator that was hired to administer the settlement made massive errors. And Kroll, another politically connected national firm, to the point where other judges in other states won't even consider them to administer settlements. So everything went wrong from the moment that train derailed. And here's the worst part. I live in a community that's separated by a railroad track. And I drive over that railroad track there's no walls, there's nothing. And those very same trains with those very same chemicals roll through Lakewood, Ohio every day. I hear the train whistles late at night. And throughout Ohio, in literally hundreds of cities and towns, this accident is waiting to happen again, and very little has been done injunctively, either through regulatory action or through the lawsuit that took place, to stop and to change the way that Norfolk Southern and I guess they have a competitor or two left that they haven't joined with. They're just not required to take those precautions. And the saddest part about East Palestine is it's coming to your town, because it could happen again. It could happen tonight. And that's what the long-term consequence of this regulatory capture of government that we talk about here is going to do. And just a brief, I just want to briefly mention former Attorney General Jim Petro and former Attorney General Nancy Rogers and Rich Cordray and I are going to file an amicus brief on behalf of the citizens of the Haitians who are now living in Springfield, Ohio, and Haitians around the country who are subject to the temporary protected status order that the court has upheld over the objections of the Department of Homeland Security. And that's being appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, and we're going to be filing an amicus brief asking the Supreme Court not to take on the case. And when I was interrupted by Pete Hegseth this morning, I was looking and looking at some data. The economy in Springfield. So I just thought, here's an interesting way for me to test out the AI system that our firm is using now. I took a look at the economic data for Springfield, Ohio, and compared it to 3 or 4 other older, formerly industrial cities throughout the state of Ohio. And over the past 4 years, Springfield has outpaced all of its peer communities in economic growth and development. And that benefits not just Haitians but it benefits everybody in those communities. I mean, they want to focus this argument on the red herring of crime. Well, there's also a lot of data that says that Haitian immigrants are no more, in fact, less likely to commit crimes than any other American citizen, or any of their peers. But even setting the crime issue aside, the benefits that those immigrants are providing to that community are demonstrable, and evidence based. And so, I hope that the Supreme Court, again, I hope it's the day of the week when the Supreme Court follows the law and not the politics. I said that today about the Ohio Supreme Court, and I feel the same way about the U.S. Supreme Court. Every once in a while, they decide to get up and do their job that day, and hopefully this is one of those days.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you to you all. Is there anybody who wants to add closing comments?
Yeah, I mean, politics should have worked. The Democrats had, as the Secretary of Transportation, somebody trained at the top business specialty firm in the world, where there was a law passed by the Democrats that would have required technology that would have prevented the accident from ever occurring. And the man, the Secretary of Transportation for the Democrats, was incredibly politically ambitious. But he didn't go to the town. He barely talked about the technology that Republicans had blocked from being used. And he didn't advocate ferociously for the people. So this is one where the politics should have led to the right answer. But this is the degree of capture that Marc is talking about, that even when it's absolutely in the direct political interests, key Democratic officials, up-and-comers, people who wanted to be president of the United States of America, didn't even try to do the right thing, didn't even show up and show the sympathy of the United States with the people. It's just a tragic comedy. It's an unforced error. It's missing 7 layups in a row.
Well, this was an extraordinary opportunity to record with some of the best in the country. I cannot express my appreciation enough for all of you, and also to Chris Swecker, who joined us. And I loved how, Bill, you had set up the context that Chris is one of the senior officials at the FBI, and I laid out in his resume all of the amazing things he was in the midst of. He did the right thing, and he had an opportunity to head off the great financial crisis in advance, and he got rug pulled by the then AG, Mr. Gonzalez, and all the things that we explored in the Con. But to see you and also Marc Dann talk to him and what that means in terms of everything that you guys did, as well as what June said and what Lewis is in the midst of every day, and our compatriot, of course, Paul Peltier, who we missed immensely on this phone call. America, these are the minds we've got to listen to. Bill Black said 7 months ago, subpoena Elon Musk. We have to get state legislatures to be able to subpoena with whistleblowers these huge cases that then can bring in the Bar Association potentially, to reveal all sorts of bad intent by officials of what's remaining, what's left of these incredible institutions that these professionals have been a part of for literally decades. And there's war, there's economic calamity, there's this, that, and the other, but it all comes down to what June has said the whole times. When you have an exorbitant amount of power in the hands of the few, the notion of the integrity of the law, the character of our democracy, and everything else goes out the window. So it's got to be up to us to subscribe and share. Pardon me, got a little tongue-tied on that. And check out the cleannewdeal.org and the newuntouchables.com and tune in, week out. And thank you to all of you out there who share. We are growing the audience. not fast enough. We literally need to reach millions of people. So on behalf of the new Untouchables, William K. Black, June Carbone, Lewis Clark, Marc Dann, Paul Peltier, and myself, Patrick Lovell, thank you to you all, and I'll look forward to seeing everybody next week.